Today, we're joined by Steve Swick, the Managing Director leading the power and utilities practice over at Discern, a company helping critical infrastructure sectors strengthen their cybersecurity postures through threat-informed, risk-based decision-making. With over 2 decades of leadership experience in the energy and utility space, Steve knows firsthand how fragile and targeted our critical infrastructure can be, and how important it is to align operational technology, information security, and workforce behavior into one cohesive strategy. Steve, welcome to the Go Phish podcast. Thanks very much for joining us.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me, Dan.
Let's start with CI-Discern. You work directly with organizations operating in critical infrastructure. How do you describe your role at CI-Discern and the value you're bringing to power and utility clients?
Sure. So it's various advisory roles depending on what they need. In some cases, I'm stepping in because head of security resigned and they need somebody to step in for a few months to run cyber and physical across IT and OT. In other cases, it's helping them expand their security program and mature it within the OT or the IT parts of the company, and making sure that there's a difference between IT and OT security, and the trust and getting the relationships across are important. So that's something I've had decades of experience doing, and that's where I'm helping some of these companies mature that into the OT space and work with the business.
Very cool. Now, you've seen the evolution of threats firsthand. In your experience, what are the biggest vulnerabilities that power and utility companies are still struggling with?
So when you're talking power and utilities, critical infrastructure, the threats and targeting is different when you're talking nation state threat actors and things like that. If they want to impact the power grid for the US, for example, we know who they're going after, right? They're going to target those types of utilities. So their threat and what is targeting them tends to be more mature in many cases, especially with the bigger utilities that are getting hammered on a regular basis. And there's no mystery. They are getting hit. The attacks happen on a regular basis. Anyone that is not seeing attacks coming on a regular basis just isn't watching or isn't capable of watching. So those are always coming at them at a varying frequency and depending on what's happening across the world, right? When there's a conflict happening internationally or something and somebody else gets ticked off at the US, which is somewhat common, that adjusts what threat may be coming at the critical infrastructure company. So they have to be aware of what the threat landscape is and then continually evolve and adjust as that's happening in their IT and their OT space.
Would you put them up there with the biggest sector with a target on their back when it comes to cyber attacks and serious threats? Or do you think the medical space is more up there, or the financial space is more up there? And I get what you're saying. It is those sophisticated attackers that are coming from nation state this is going to be their first target, walking around with a big bloody target on your back there. Or do you think it's just as high a threat in the finance or the medical space?
I think it's active across all of them. People always want money, right? So when you're talking the financial sector, the money piece is important to all countries across the world. Medical, there's a lot of vulnerabilities in that space. There's a lot of data and information that is of high desire in that world. So they are getting actively attacked on a regular basis too. They're each critical infrastructure and attacked on a regular basis, but the threat groups that are targeting them can be different. They're specialized groups in some of the nation states that do not love the US or have an agenda. They've got targeted groups that are focusing on it, that specialize in critical infrastructure, energy, healthcare, whatever. So I'd say it's comparable across the board, actually.
Yeah. Before I started working in the oil and gas industry years back, and I was doing security for oil companies around the world, I had no idea. I'd never heard of OT before. Operational technology and the systems that drive some of these big companies, whether it's oil and gas, whether it's electricity, whether it's water, your utilities, and that operational technology that keeps things ticking over. That security it's always been tricky. Blending legacy systems, new tech, human factors, it'll all be really messy. What advice do you give to clients trying to improve OT cybersecurity without disrupting those critical operations?
I'd say one of the most important things is being very collaborative with the business on helping understand what the business's needs are and that part of the critical infrastructure. How does it work? What is critical for them that you cannot disrupt? And then figuring out how to protect it. That some of those systems have been in place 50, 60, 70 years ago They're not
Exactly.
the AI enabled stuff we're talking about today or cloud. It is a whole different world where that stuff may not have
Yeah.
been touched on a regular basis. While it's very stable and very resilient and designed that way, it also isn't designed to be updated on a regular frequency. So you can't just take a Microsoft patch and dump it on that system once a month and then do a quick reboot. That's not the way they operate. And making sure you understand that before you even walk in to talk to that part of the business is very important, and gaining their trust that you help them succeed. You can't disrupt their business. They're 24/7, 365. There is no time that let's just do it during off hours.
Yeah.
There is no
Yeah.
off hours. Everybody needs water. Everybody needs power. It always has to be running. So figuring out how to do it carefully, methodically, working with the business and understanding with them and maintaining their trust is, I'd say, one of the most essential things, and where a lot of security teams fall down. They're trying to come at it from
Okay.
their IT security role and not necessarily understanding that part of the business and becoming part of that business,
And
which
in
is
those
critical.
situations, yeah, I mean, your CISO there covering IT and OT, his role in bridging that gap is more important than ever if you're wanting to get that collaboration right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a very fragile relationship, right?
Yeah.
They've been burned multiple times over the years by some technology, some IT person that pushed something up.
Yeah.
So you do have to
Yeah.
overcome those challenges. They still remember all that stuff. So you need to walk in
Yeah.
with a fresh mindset and earn that trust that I understand. I'm going to be super careful. I want to help you succeed and the business succeed.
Yeah. Love it. Security awareness in critical infrastructure isn't just as important as so much of the other risk management controls in place, but it often gets pushed to the back. How do you embed security culture in environments where uptime and safety are the top priorities?
I think transparent and open communication is a leading part of that. They need to understand what the threat is, what the risks are to their environment. It may have been running for the last 50 years, that issue. That doesn't mean something isn't trying to attack them on a regular basis. So making sure you don't come across paranoid and all that, and then figuring out how to get the security to them so it does not disrupt their daily role. You have people out in the field touching different types of hardware and systems that aren't sitting at a computer where you can just say, hey, take time out of your day and click on this training. It's got to be optimized for them in the field, in the operating areas, and as well as in the business areas, right? So sometimes you have to have customized pieces and you have to touch on all aspects of the business a little bit so they understand that you're tailoring it for them and you're working with them. But it has to be prioritized, like you said. They have to understand the risk. They have to be trained. Everybody has to be trained, including us security experts, right? So it's very important.
I almost think companies operating in the critical infrastructure space would probably be a lot quicker and a lot more effective at adopting cybersecurity practices when it comes to the humans and building secure culture where the whole organization understands it, adopts it, follows it, gets it a lot quicker. And the reason I think that is this is the sector where health and safety has been paramount for decades now, and nothing happens without safety regulations, safety compliance, safety culture. They're very mature when it comes to knowing what the rules are, knowing what their role is, knowing when to report, making sure that nothing stops operations, no safety incident, everybody's safe. And I think bringing cybersecurity and security awareness into those types of industries is not a huge leap, really, for those companies. They already run on culture like that. They run on a see something, say something situation, and the ability to stop operations for safety, and everybody owns safety, and it cascades down from the CEO down. Just slotting cybersecurity and trying to build a secure culture now in 2025 is not as big a leap as it is maybe for other organizations that never had that type of culture to work under.
Yeah, that's a very accurate description of all that. And in reality, the security culture and the security awareness piece should be riding on the coattails of the safety that has been embedded in the business. And they start out with safety briefing every morning in many cases.
Yeah.
Tie in a little bit of security awareness with that, and you've got the whole package, right? And making sure they understand pieces of their business where they aren't on their computer all the time. But if they click on that one wrong email that says their benefits changed or something, that could open up a whole door and then create safety issues, resiliency, reliability issues, and making sure they make that connection is super important.
Yeah.
Very true.
What we're doing on the podcast, Steve, is we've got a hot topic roulette. So we pick a single topic to chat about each episode, and I get to pick a professional's brain about one particular awareness subject that we want to train people up on and make people aware of. So for this episode, let's chat about third-party risk. We've seen a spike in attacks coming in through vendors and contractors. In the power sector, how serious is this risk, and what practical steps can organizations take to manage human-related third-party risk?
That's a good topic, Dan. The third-party risk is critical there just as much as anywhere else. A lot of the critical infrastructure companies, they're relying on third parties to touch some of those systems that are controlling the operational technology, the water, the power, whatever. Those big companies are reaching directly in some cases. So you need to figure out how to design that securely. So from the technical perspective, but also the contractual and the assessment to make sure that company is doing all the things it should be doing to its own due diligence. So electric sector, for example, has a critical infrastructure standard that they have to comply with that says they need to do an assessment on that third party that they're working with, meaning contractual assessment with liability, making sure they've got their right pieces of resiliency, they have their incident response plan, and they're going to tell them if a problem happens in their environment so that you can prepare, even if it doesn't directly impact you or they don't think it does, because cyber attacks evolve and people think it only hit this, and then they figure out a month later, actually it hit these 5 other things too. So they need to communicate and say, we don't think it hit you, but it did happen. And that clear communication as far as that third-party risk is important.
And how are they doing that, Steve? Are they outsourcing it to teams like yours? Have they got an internal team who does nothing else but assess third parties every day of the year? Or what does that actually look like for the utilities companies to ensure that level of security remains throughout their supply chain?
So this role specifically could absorb dozens and dozens of people. If you tried to staff it entirely in-house, you could allocate tons of people. And there is a requirement for the legal team to be involved, for the supply chain and the procurement team to be involved, security teams to be involved, technology, business. Everybody really needs to play a part in this. So I think the ones that do it best, it's a combination. There are people in the company that own each piece of that and are actively participating. But some of that assessment work, some of that real-time monitoring of events happening in other companies, I think there's a combination of partnership that needs to happen with vendors or providers that can help augment all that work that needs to be done. And in some cases, streamline it and say, here's a very well mapped out process you can follow, a system that you can track everything in, packaged services or pieces that you can take a packaged piece, apply it, and now you've sped up that whole process, because it is a time consuming, resource consuming process to do, but it's a diligence that has to be done. You can't overlook it.
Yeah, for sure. And then with that diligence and those assessments, you can have real-time monitoring, but the assessments are really just a point-in-time assessment. A day later, they could not be compliant with it. And how are the larger companies ensuring that? Is it regular assessments throughout the year? Is it live monitoring? How are they making sure that these companies remain compliant? Because on the day of the assessment, the paint on the walls smells great and everything looks fantastic and you check all your boxes and you're 100%. But a month later, you could be a dumpster fire for cybersecurity and you could be the piece that falls down and lets everybody down. How are the companies making sure of that?
So a lot of companies have not thousands or hundreds of thousands of vendors. So you have to prioritize which ones are the most critical. And those most critical ones, you need to have real-time monitoring of events that could be happening through the dark web and stuff. And you also need to be coming back and circling back and doing that assessment on a frequency, whether it's at least annually for those critical vendors, coming back through and saying, I need to see your documentation again. I need to talk to your security person. You better have a security person. And I want to talk to them. Those types of things. So you're just continually realizing it. And also knowing that it is a discussion. Things change on a daily basis. It could turn on them tomorrow, but you still have to be doing that diligence on a regular basis in case they
Yeah.
didn't prioritize it, and they laid off their security team because they were just expensive and a pain in the butt. So they laid them all off. Now there's no one watching the gates for that company that is now
Yeah.
connected directly to many cases.
Yeah. No, it's huge. Okay, cool. What mistakes are you seeing companies make when it comes to the human element, Steve? We know phishing and social engineering are still wildly effective. What other behaviors are still tripping people up that you're seeing and discovering?
Really, it's the human behavior, the human element is always going to be one of the weaker links. People get busy, people get distracted. The phishing and the AI that is evolving, the capabilities of social engineering is evolving quickly, and it's going to become more difficult. So those employees need to continually be aware, continually be alert, and then be trained on the things that they should watch for. We're never going to be able to stop doing that.
Yeah.
Never be able to stop.
Training in high stakes industries, it has to stick. It's that important. How are you approaching security awareness differently for power and utilities compared to other sectors?
There's a company I'm working with now that their program is very good. They customize a lot of their training to that part of the business. So they'll take what they've got and then they tweak it so it's touching and talking to the people out in the field, talking to the people within the operational technology business, talking to the people in the technology or the business areas, and making sure it's refreshed on a monthly basis. They get new training at the same time, sending out real time alerts about threats that could be coming out there. We've seen spear
Brilliant.
phishing has ramped up in the last few months, targeting critical infrastructure. So you send out an awareness communication separate from your regular training and your regular phishing you're doing. It's really that transparent and communicative thing that needs to regularly happen.
Keeping security front of mind for everybody on a sort of regular basis.
Right.
Now, I mean,
it's everyone's job, right?
It's everyone's job, like
Right.
safety. Security doesn't live in a vacuum. How are you aligning cyber risk strategies with business operations and real world scenarios? How important is leadership buy-in? How is it part of your role to help companies understand where cybersecurity sits in their risk plan? Do you coach companies to understand that and help them find a place in the risk table for these organizations and find a spot in that risk table? How are you helping organizations build their risk management strategies, ensuring cybersecurity is now part of that?
It's difficult. There's a lot of work to do within that space, but ensuring they are incorporating the business functions in those discussions and having that relationship to pull it in and evaluate that risk applied to whatever function that is. It could be their HR function and information loss or things like that, or it could be the business area that's controlling this critical power plant and ensuring that risk for that vendor is evaluated, the risk for the new product that they're getting ready to upgrade or implement, or the function on how it's happening, and make sure there's no blind spots, right? That they may be looking at this part of that critical part of the business, but they overlook this part that doesn't evolve much, but it's still technology. It's still something the CIO could still have to speak to the executive team or the board. When something happens to that technology, they're going to go to the technology people to talk to it. They may not go to the business people. So making sure that understanding of which pieces, who owns what, and who owns the risk for those environments is super important, because there's often not a clear understanding on what it is, what there's visibility of, and who owns that risk.
Yeah. And the risks that these types of organizations carry is quite different to your normal shops on the high street or in some of these organizations. If they can't deliver their service and the lights go out, cities around, people die, hospitals rely on them, governments rely on them. And if their risks aren't managed correctly, it can be extremely serious. And so they've got some very serious risks in that risk register to consider. Where are you finding cybersecurity sitting in the risk register for these larger companies that you're working with? If you've got your top 10 risks that the businesses are considering and mitigating for and meeting over, where's cybersecurity sitting?
I've never talked to one that didn't have it in the top right corner of their risk matrix or heat map. So because the cyber event could cause any of those things to happen. So ensuring they're tracking that as a top risk, but ensuring they always have the reliability, the resiliency, and the recovery prepped, because whether it's a storm that causes an outage or a cyber event that causes an outage, we need to bring them back up immediately. Figuring out how to recover quickly while we address whatever cyber event is happening. Those things have to happen in tandem in some cases. We've noticed some big energy companies that had issues that were down for weeks or months. That stuff has to be tested on a disconnect, separate them on some regular basis so you know that you can bring it back when something happens. You have to test in the real.
And Steve, are you helping with that testing, or do you help put together tabletop exercises, crisis management scenarios for the companies, and walking them through their plans and pushing them like that?
Absolutely. Actually, I'm working on one with the client now, which really is talking about this one. We're talking to the executive team, and we're going to do a tabletop with the executive team. Here's what the security person is going to walk in and tell you. And then what is your input? How are you going to respond to this type of scenario? And then making sure even the board of directors is aware that this tabletop happened. Here's what we learned from that tabletop. Just doing them is important, and walking through that process is important, in the thought process, but also realizing what lessons learned you can pull out of that and continue to improve every time. And you need to push the team and come up with scenarios that push their comfort zone, right? If they think they're comfortable with all this stuff, then you push it a little further on this side. Make sure it's realistic, but you got to push them a little bit so they keep thinking outside the box.
Yeah, I love it. And it's that fine balance. It was something I used to do a lot in the oil industry. It's that fine balance for your scenarios and the audience of your scenarios in your tabletops. You need to find the perfect balance where people are pushed to outside of their comfort zone so that they are learning, so that they're taking it seriously, but they're also leaving the room confident. You don't want people leaving the room thinking, this is a nightmare. We're never going to be able to manage this. If it happens, the sky is falling in. They need to leave with a bit of confidence that if it happens, we can come together as a team and nail this. So it's trying to strike that balance is always tough.
That is very true. That you actually have to have a scenario that they can be successful or know what the path is to success. There's some national cyber exercises that happen in the US and actually across North America that are called GridX, where they test all these scenarios, and sometimes they take all communication system across the country out. Now, what are you going to do? Some of those scenarios, people to think through. Oh, so no, there's no phones, there's no internet, okay, now what do I do then? Those are really pushing the limits. When I do them inside the companies, I do try to make sure there's a path to success and they can improve, but it's not the world blowing up. It's definitely got to be realistic and attainable so they have confidence when they walk out. You said it perfectly.
Yeah. Steve, this has been really interesting and great chatting, man. I really appreciate it. Before I let you go, let me know, where can people connect with you online and learn more about CI-Discern and the work that you guys are doing in that space?
Sure. So we've got a website out there, CI-Discern.com. You can hit that, or you can hit me on LinkedIn, and we can talk through however we can help and continue to mature cyber processes across the US or the country, wherever.
Amazing, mate. Steve, thanks very much for joining us. It's been fantastic.
Absolutely. Thanks for the invite, Dan.
Thanks very much, everyone, for tuning in. This has been the Go Phish podcast. Catch you all next time. Bye.